we are again from EMRS TV, and I'm happy to present you João Pedro VEIGA from the FCT NOVA from Portugal. So
hello.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting.
And well, first of all, I want you to know, so the EMRS is running like 1.5 days now, probably. So what are your personal highlights from the EMRS so far, and what are you looking forward to?
From the current EMRS conference? Yes, well, I'm much involved in the EMRS conferences, usually, related to the organization of a symposium dedicated to cultural heritage materials. So my main interest is to include cultural heritage as a material worth studying and characterizing through techniques, advanced techniques, that you can use and that you usually find in different symposia in the conference. So usually we go for instance, for solar cells, or we go to more modern materials, and you use techniques to characterize and to those materials, their properties and their states. And then we intend to apply these kinds of perspectives to old materials. So in the perspective to protect them for the community. We are mainly interested in European heritage. So that's the relationship with the EMRS, which usually supports us by giving us the opportunity to organize this symposium, which is kind of looked upon as something strange, because you
as
can
the underdog, probably.
you speak about ceramics, but you speak about ceramics applied to solar cells or to displays, electronic displays, and we talk about ceramic materials as the ancient ceramics, or the glasses, or metals, or so we look into materials with a different perspective in mind.
So can you share a bit more about the perspective? Because what makes a material a cultural heritage and what doesn't, probably?
So usually we associate cultural heritage with tangible goods. So you have an object that you can study, but sometimes cultural heritage, it's not exclusively related with materials, either with paper, old paper. So paper in what you see in old books, or you see in illuminators with the beautiful designs from the 15th or the 14th century. It's also intangible cultural heritage. So we sometimes have works that relates to, imagine, memory that is transmitted across generations. Of course, in this kind of symposia, in the materials that we work with are mainly materials, physical materials that we can touch, that we can work. So to classify it as a cultural heritage, of course, we look first if it's old, so if it has some age associated with it, or if it is culturally interesting. So you can also have new materials, and you can study materials like plastics, but that are used in works of art. And so we have to study them also in the perspective of degradation, of the reaction with environmental conditions, for instance, if they exist in outdoors, if they exist indoors. So cultural heritage, in fact, is related to all that you want to preserve, that you find it's important for cultural activities and for the history of humanity, really.
And how do you connect to the other symposia? Because, as you said, you're have a special perspective on this, but is there some interconnection between?
It is an interesting question. Even now, we were speaking with some colleagues that are, in fact, not in our symposium dedicated to cultural heritage, but they look into ceramics, and I will be using words from a colleague, not my own. And an idea from him. He was interested in perovskites, and so perovskites are used nowadays in electronics. But in fact, you can find this type of materials, this type of structure, in old ceramics with more than 2,000 years of age. So there is an interesting connection between old and new materials, as you eventually find yourself studying materials that are made in old times, but that they even sometimes use manufacture techniques that will give you an interesting perspective. Imagine glasses that we find that are red. And then we discovered some years ago that this color red was due to nanoparticles. Copper nanoparticles is one of the cases. And so in old days, they already had the technique to produce these nanoparticles inside a glass to give them a special identity, so in this case the color. Nowadays we use these techniques to produce nanoparticles inside of glasses to give different properties. Color it can be, or it can be related to electrical properties or to mechanical properties. So you have different symposia. You have different symposia which are dedicated to the materials that we produce and use nowadays. But when you go to observe these materials, in fact, you can find a connection between them and the old materials, which is quite interesting.
Sounds very fascinating. Okay. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
Okay, it was a pleasure. Thank you.